Welcome back to the Bonafide Truth. I'm your host, Bonafide Soldier, and today's video is going to be about how polytheism may be the only way to save God, how monotheism is completely false, and why we need to look elsewhere for answers. So firstly, monotheism is a misconception. People that believe in monotheism think that they are worshiping one supreme God, but then they also forget that they have angels. You have angels that you also worship or that you also attest to. But where do the angels come from? Where do angels originate from? What are angels? Angels are called the Malek, which comes from the word to mean messenger, but also this is the name of a deity, or could be the name of a deity, that is related to what they would know as Molech today, but the ancient Israelites would have known as Milcom, or the Canaanites would have known as Milcom, and then the people of Ugarit would have known as Maliku or Milku, and then before that he would have been known as Malik or Maliku. This is where the origin of the word angel comes from. It comes from the name of a god that was one of the kings of the gods, a kingly deity, Milcom. Angels are gods. We see this many of times in the Bible, that they are talking about lords, spirits, angels, all in the same breath. They're gods. The Elohim and angels and spirits and lords, the Adonai, they are all gods. This is true. We see multiple bits of evidence of this in the text. So how is it that Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, which acknowledges the biblical text as its source, that the Israelite text is the origin of this version of their theology, how is it possible that Abrahamic faith came into existence under monotheism when its origins are in polytheism and henotheism? The Israelites were henotheistic, just like the rest of Canaanites, and collectively the Canaanites were originally polytheistic. So how is it that we've concluded that there is only one God and that this God is all powerful? The one God that we are saying is the singular deity over everything is Yahweh, though some would contest that it became Jesus or Yeshua, though the evidence for that is scarce. The evidence for that is non-existent to scarce to very minimal to just being a misconception. But even if we were to suppose that it's either Yahweh or Yeshua, neither one of them is the omniscient, omnipotent, or omnipresent God that we like to describe today in modern lens, under modern terms and semantics. We see not a bit of evidence in the text that Yahweh or Yeshua or the Holy Spirit, who is actually Ashura, is omnipresent, omnipotent, or omniscient. We see no evidence of these gods being all good or all bad. We see no evidence of any of this. What we see evidence of is of deities that are nationalized or localized, that may have properties that hold the principles together for our nature and instantiate the principles for our existence and our reality. We see that there may be they may be the maintainers of matter, but we don't see them being everywhere all at once. We don't see them being the most intelligent, nor do we see them being the most powerful. These beings are all relatively powerful towards each other. They're all relatively as powerful as the next one. You could argue that the older ones, or the higher tier Elohim that come from the first generation, could possibly be the most powerful. But even then, there's sparse evidence to suggest that. Are you saying that Shahar and Shalem are more powerful than Baal Hadad, who may have been born after them? But Baal Hadad was able to become the king? The idea that I'm trying to get you to understand is that there are multiple gods in Israelite theology because it comes from Canaanite theology, which comes from Mesopotamian theology, and that all encompasses ancient Near Eastern theology. This theology has been made or forced to be monotheistic, but is originally polytheistic and henotheistic. They had a pantheon of two Most High gods, being the Most High God and his consort, El or Eloah and Elat, El and Ashra, and then their 70 plus descendants. From Dagon to Baal Hadad to Shahar and Shalem to Astarte to Yahweh to Yam to Nahadru. There are so many deities that how is it that we can ignore them? How is it that we can sit here and act like they mean nothing when they meant everything to those people? They meant so much to those people that they angelicized them, and we're still talking about them backhandedly to this day, or offhandedly to this day. We have, and then they occupy multiple roles. Like, for example, Baal Hadad is not just Beelzebub, which is supposed to be a play or a demonization of Baal Zephon, but also this is, we know that Baal Hadad influenced the archangel Michael, who is like God. Baal Hadad is like El. That is who is like El, because the word for God would have been El, and that is the proper name of the God of Israel and of Canaan. The Most High God was El Elyon. And Baal Hadad is one of the high kingly deities, so he would have been like El. And we see him slaying the great dragon just like Michael does. But Michael is also influenced by Melchizedek, who is based off of Sadiq. Sadiq, the god of righteousness, the Elohim of righteousness, from the city of Salem, or from the nation of Salem, another Canaanite nation that is named after a god, Shalem. Jerusalem is named in honor of the god Shalem, the god of peace. Shalem, his brother Shahar, is the father of Atar, who is Hillel, who is Lucifer, the supposed devil or Satan of the Bible. But even then, we see that there is no actual reason to believe that there is a Satan that is after everyone. There is no reason to believe that there is a devil that is coming for you. The Bible never suggests this. Not in the Old Testament, at least. The New Testament has a lot of new ideas that come from the Greco-Romans. And these new ideas include ideas like hell, include a pursuant devil-like figure. But even then, it still wasn't what we think of it as today. These ideas have been modified and recultivated for different cultures and different generations. Yahweh never worked alone. He was never seen as an independent deity until they tried to make him an independent deity. He had a council and still has the council. He doesn't have the council. He's a part of the council. That's what Psalms 82 is about. That's what there are several council meetings in the Bible, actually. But to ignore them and act like, well, the other beings in the council, they don't matter, or they're just angels. Why is it that we can't understand that these gods have been repurposed and reimagined as angels or messengers, when originally even the angels or the so-called messengers are also gods? They're just lesser Elohim. So the idea that we can sit here and say that God is just a monotheistic God and that God is Yahweh, that's unrealistic, that's improbable, and it's impossible based off of the evidence. And polytheism may be the only way to save this God, because it's the truth about this God. If we want to save Yahweh, the truth about Yahweh is that Yahweh comes from a polytheistic culture, and polytheistic theology may be the only way that Yahweh makes the most sense. But then even once we make sense of Yahweh and polytheism, you have to come to terms with what this means. This means that there is more than one God for you to give any type of reverence to. This also means that there is more than one God in action, and that they cooperate. They have to. How does How does Baal Hadad control the atmospheres without having to also have some type of influence over the waters? Well, because he has to work with Yam and Naharu. How does Yahweh come up with life when life requires water and land? He has to work with the Dama and Yam and Naharu, and he needs the atmosphere to cultivate this land. So he needs to work with Baal Hadad, but then who gives the land sustenance and grain? It's Dagon. You see? Who gives us continuity and life? It's Asherah, Yahweh, Baal Hadad, all the Elohim. They help maintain our existence if they are real. So if you believe that Yahweh was a real being, you have to believe that the other gods are also real. Lest you suppose that Yahweh was defeated by an idol, a statue, a carving. Because there have been times when the Israelites and Yahweh have been defeated, but that doesn't work for the monotheistic narrative. Because how is this the most powerful God that created the heavens and the earth, and he's losing to a statue? He's losing to people like Jacob. He's the story lies many of times about Yahweh's identity and where and what is actually going on in the scene. How can Yahweh rebuke Yahweh? That doesn't make sense. There has to be either there's two Yahwehs or there's more going on. And what is going on is you are seeing a compress or a compaction of these stories. They are compacting and compressing these stories so that way they can create a new narrative and have Yahweh take up all the roles. That is what has happened. Look into this. Look into where all the stories come from. Some of the stories are original to the time period in which they were written. Most of the stories have an origin and influence and an inspiration from Canaan, Ugarit, and Mesopotamia, the ancient Near East. They influenced each other. They influenced their stories. They influenced their theology. So please look into Canaanite theology or just ancient Near Eastern theology as a whole, and you will understand that there is no monotheism. If you want monotheism, you have to find that God, because that God has never been found. If you want polytheism, we have plenty of evidence for that. But you just have to reinterpret some things in order to make sense of the modern scope that you have. So when you try to see things from a modern lens, try to replace that with the polytheistic frame and see how it looks. See, well, if I say that Shapsu, the sun goddess, is responsible for maintaining solar energy, and Yarik is supposed to maintain the moon and the tides of the ocean that it affects with Yam and stuff like that. These gods are supposed to work together. That makes more sense than one God doing everything, but then also needing angels, also not being everywhere all at once, also not being all powerful, also being very humanistic or anthropomorphic, but then also trying to be mysterious, but then not too mysterious when you read into the stories, because the only mystery is who this God really is, or if this God ever really existed. Other than that, we know that this God is not omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent. You can't find evidence of it. Any evidence you find will be anecdotal and very subjective, but the evidence of any of these gods being polytheistic and being not all-knowing, not all-powerful, not everywhere all at once, that is obvious. They have never claimed to be anything but themselves and not anything that we have projected onto them. So we need to understand that monotheism is dying, it's dead. There are either multiple gods or no God at all. And that's unfortunate, because even if there is a monotheistic God, that God wouldn't care, or wouldn't care to the extent that we would hope, because we see no interference. We see no interaction. All we see is creation. And I guess you could just be grateful for that. And that's fine. And that works for you, that works for you. It may work for me. I'm just looking into all the avenues before I travel down the road to see what is at the end. What is the destination? Where are we going to lead? Where are we going to end up? Maybe multiple gods, one God, no God at all. I'm just here for the truth, and you should too. This has been the Bonafide Truth. Thank you for watching and listening. Hopefully you have something else to add. You have something that you learned. Hopefully you find the truth for yourself. Have a good one.